My guess is if this is the first time you have ever heard this scripture, you're a little shocked, perhaps even maybe a little appalled at Jesus' words to the Syrophoenician woman. And for those of us who have heard this story before, I think we still are a little shocked and even appalled at hearing Jesus' words to this woman. I know that I cringe at his words. They make me feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure how I am to react to them. It's certainly not in line with the Jesus that we tell our children about, wanting to defer to the kind and compassionate and loving Jesus. You know, the Jesus who turns water into wine at the party, the Jesus who feeds the multitude instead of sending them home hungry, the one who looks into the Samaritan woman's eyes and offers her living water. Jesus, the one who would touch the lepers and the tax collectors and the poor and offer all those on the margins a chance to re-enter and be a part of society, offering life and wholeness and holiness. This is the Jesus that we'd like to talk about, not the Jesus that we find at the beginning of the scripture. My very first impulse is to try to explain it away or rationalize it, to soften it, maybe even make excuses for Jesus so that I am not as offended by his dismissive and offensive words. It's okay, guys. It's not really what it seems. Jesus didn't mean exactly that. He's just, perhaps maybe he's testing the woman's faith. Remember, he is really tired. He's exhausted, and we all know what exhaustion does. He wants a little peace and rest. He wants time out of the limelight just to be and wind down before hitting the road and all those who will flock to him and demand of him. You see, Jesus, like the rest of us, got tired and he needed a break. But his popularity made it difficult for him to get that and to go unnoticed. So it makes sense that he goes to this place, a place to seek refuge and sanctuary and maybe Sabbath as we understand it. A few days of solitude and silence, avoiding the constant recognition and perennial crowds, certainly would have been a welcome relief. We could all use that. But his attempts to remain unnoticed fails. His reputation as a powerful healer had permeated even through the culture that was a distant region. Almost immediately, a woman with an urgent need presents herself at his door. She has heard that he is nearby and she has sought him out. But like many of those that sought Jesus' help out, this woman carries a lot of negative baggage with her. First of all, she's a female, and males and females didn't talk to each other out in public. Second, she is not Jewish. She is actually a Greek origin, so therefore she is a Gentile, and she would have been seen unclean and not part of who they were. And third is, it means she had a demon-possessed daughter. And back then, when you had an illness, you had considered to be sinful, that you had done something to cause that, or something that you did. 3 strikes against her. But knowing all this does not deter her from her mission. Breaking into Jesus' hideaway, she respectfully bows at his feet before begging him to cast out the demon of her daughter. His response catches us by surprise as we listen in shock. I wonder if it caught those who were with him that day by surprise too. I would love to see their faces. I wonder what they were thinking as Jesus says to her, "Woman, let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." Let me be clear, Jesus' words are rightly understood as a biting insult. Dogs in first century Palestine were seen as scavengers rather than pampered pets. The Jewish people often referred to the Gentiles as dog. It was meant as a slur. It was degrading. It wasn't a nice term. So you see, no matter how often we read this story, Jesus' words sting. They're out of character of the image we have of Jesus. His words are meant to stop conversation and send her immediately on her way. But it doesn't happen. Interestingly enough, the woman does not seem to be offended or put off by Jesus' words to her. As a matter of fact, she proves to be a formidable opponent in this verbal contest of wits, and a humble one as well. Instead of being defensive and combative, she is contrite and reasonable. Without raising her voice in anger or frustration, she calmly acknowledges that she might be a cultural dog, but she is gladly willing to accept that position if it means being fed with what she is seeking, the healing of her daughter. Honestly, I've read this before and I haven't paid much attention, but I find that I like this woman. I tend to gravitate towards strong women. I like that she's resilient and focused. And on a mission of love for her daughter, she will let nothing get in her way to stop what she is seeking. She knows that Jesus heals, and more than anything else, she wants that for her daughter. Her love is so great that she is determined. And no matter what he says, his insults, his apparent lack of concern for her daughter, she still says and will not let go, I get it. I get they get fed first. But boy, am I willing to take those crumbs. If Jesus seemed remote and emotionally distant in the dealing with the Syrophoenician woman, we find just the opposite in the second healing, that of the deaf, mute man. His interaction with the man and his friends brings us back to our comfort zone. We can almost phew. No need to hold our breath or make excuses for Jesus' treatment of this man. There are no snarky or offensive remarks. We find the Jesus we're used to reading about and hearing about and love to tell. The compassionate Jesus, the hands-on Jesus, the Jesus who's willing to physically touch and use his own spit for healing, even on an unclean person where other people stayed away. This is the kind of actions by Jesus that make sense to us, that we like for, we root for, we cheer for, we lift up and share with those who don't know about Jesus. Interesting contrast, isn't it? Interesting why they are put together in our reading for today. So I thought about this. So I thought, perhaps Jesus' varied healing techniques reflect his ability to personalize his ministry to needs to others. So think of the different ways he healed. Sometimes a woman touches out to him and he feels the strength going to her. Other times, as in this woman here, he says, go home, your daughter is well. He doesn't even touch the person. Sometimes he physically touches. Sometimes he says a word. Sometimes he does it out in the open, sometimes in private. We know that he didn't use the same manner of healing. He employed different ones for different accomplishments. Some methods were strange. Sometimes they were plain. Sometimes they were controversial. But I believe that his goal was always the same, was to bring wholeness and wellness into people's lives. So takes me back to that woman. And I don't know if it's because I'm a woman that I kind of associate with her. So I had this thought that's been churning. Perhaps Jesus had an ulterior motive when responding to the woman. Perhaps we are looking at this all wrong. Perhaps his dismissal was a guise in order to allow the woman and those around Jesus that day to see her strength and value and worth as a child of God as she claimed her voice and as he lifted up her as an example of faith to others. You see, she becomes the one who models God's expansive love that is for all. So perhaps, and I haven't really thought it out really clearly, so I'm just kind of testing it with you, perhaps he was intentional in what he was doing. Not really to put her down, but rather to allow her to be lifted up. I don't know, I'll have to think about that. I'm not sure yet, but I like that thought process. Leanne Van Dyke writes this about these healings in Mark. She says, in the Gospel of Mark, only after Jesus deeply engaged with the other people, those who lived outside the bounds of his familiar culture, did he begin his patter of healing the sick and feeding the multitudes. Encountering the other seemed in Mark to change Jesus, to expand his horizons, and to enlarge his empathy. She goes on to say, similarly, our congregations are enlarged and deepened by authentic encounters with the other. The church is called to extend itself far beyond the cozy boundaries of familiarity. Furthermore, the church must listen carefully to the voices of those on the margins. Often it is the powerless who are the teachers. I don't just think, I truly believe that she is right. The church, you and me and Pine Shores, the church at large, we are called to extend ourselves far beyond our cozy boundaries of familiarity if we want to truly be the church that God has called us to be. We have to be willing to step out of our comfort zone and safe haven, and we must listen carefully to the voices of those in the margins. That is why we do what we do sometimes. That is why we're a part of Shore and Help at Bethel and Family Promise. We want to hear those that we don't always see and listen to. But I want to push this a little further. Not only those that we associate with the others, the homeless, the less privileged, the refugees, the poor, but I also want to talk about those within our own faith communities. Those voices that are kind of on the margin here in our own church. Because believe it or not, we have them. We have them. I think they have something to say to us, something to teach us. The question for us, for those who in the power and the know and the majority, who are in their comfort zone, will we give them a chance? And then becomes the most important question. Will we listen? Will we listen to those who have much to say?